This past summer, I received an email from a childhood friend of mine. Cindy lived across the street and 2 doors up. And since the invention of the internet and email, we've got back in touch with each other. She lives in northern Pennsylvania and is a professor at a university there. And oftentimes she will write to me asking me to say a mass for her father who's died, or to remember somebody in the family who's sick. Or she's even invited me to come to her parish and give a parish retreat or mission. I haven't been able to go as of yet because of my duties here. But this email this summer was a little different. She was reflecting back on our childhood and many of the things that took place and happened. And one of the things that she mentioned was near and dear to her heart is that she always remembered the stories that my best friend Carl and I used to tell her about our adventures in the woods that was near our house. She said we would come and tell her about all of the battles we fought and the forts that we made and the adventures that we had. The imagination of kids living out the summer or life in their surroundings. And I wrote back to her and I said, yes, I remembered those days too, and with a lot of affection and fondness. But what got me thinking was her mention of my best friend Carl. Carl and I were very, very good friends from when I was about 4 years old until when I was 7. He was bigger than I was physically, but younger than I was. And he had a number of disabilities. He had trouble seeing, he had trouble speaking, and had to go to a special school in order to learn how to speak. He was often made fun of by the kids in the neighborhood, as kids often do with somebody that's different. But for some reason, he was my best friend, and we did everything together. Now, when I was 7 years old, it was Easter Monday. We had off from school, and rather than being in the neighborhood out playing as I usually would have been, I was in the big city of Pittsburgh. I had been invited there along with my sister and brother to go to the movies with my aunt and to have lunch. When we came home from this day in the big city, as we were sitting at the dinner table, my mother and father very solemnly told me that Carl had died that day. He had been out with the kids in the neighborhood and they were making fun of him again, and some of them were chasing him, and he ran into the middle of the street and was hit by a car. That moment, that event changed my entire life. And I've often thought over the years when I've reflected with my spiritual director on how things are going in life, when I've thought about different things about my life, Carl always is part of that. I think I am the person that I am today, the passionist, the priest, the man of faith that I am today because of him and that short period of life that I knew him. I've often preached homilies about him or given retreat talks about him, and people will come up and say, I knew somebody like that. I've gone back home at times and talked to people in my hometown, and oftentimes Carl comes up in the conversation. He has touched many people's lives. That's what saints do. They touch our life and they live on with us. Sometimes they're the great saints like St. Francis or St. Clare or St. Teresa of Lisieux or Blessed Teresa of Calcutta or Blessed John the 23rd or St. Paul of the Cross, the founder of the Passionists. The Church has honored them in a real way. But there's a lot of other saints out there, saints that we encounter day in and day out, maybe just for a few years when we're children, or maybe people that are with us for our whole life. And their spirit stays with us, and they guide and direct us, and they help us. They're the people that Jesus talks about in the gospel today. Whenever I hear that gospel, I think of Carl. He was a peacemaker. He was meek. He was poor in spirit. But he was a child of God, and that's whom we celebrate today. And I'm sure you have people that you want to celebrate, to bring to this table, to renew you in your own journey of faith.